This week, I'm reviewing a game that has an interesting name. I always used to pronounce it Faxanadu, but as I grew older, I'm pretty sure it's called Faxanadu. Why? Well, it's supposed to be a combination of an old Japanese PC RPG series known as Xanadu and Famicom, so Faxanadu. Who knows, I could be wrong on this logic, but that's what the internet says, and the internet is always right. So what is Faxanadu? It's a 2D action RPG, sort of similar to Zelda 2, or to me more like Battle of Olympus. You play as an elven dude coming home to find the town Aeolus in complete disarray. This town is at the bottom of the world tree, and it just so happens that a fallen meteorite corrupted the dwarves, who then invaded the elven cities. The nameless hero sets out, after receiving some money from the king, to defeat the evil that this meteorite brought forth. At first, you start with absolutely nothing. No money, no items, no armor, no weapons, no magic. Hell, the hero even starts with a fraction of his HP and MP. After getting a starting 1,500 pieces of gold from the king, you can opt to heal up, buy a dagger, some armor, and even magic or items. The dagger isn't the best weapon, as it cannot attack enemies that are crawling low to the ground, and you cannot crouch, but you'll find magic can take care of that problem. Eventually, later weapons can take care of any of the enemies that you find, but it'll be a while, so it's your option whether you want to dodge or use magic to take down those threats. One of the oddest things that you'll notice right away is that the momentum of the hero is kind of, well, odd. He gains momentum as he keeps moving, starting out slow and then gradually picking up speed. This isn't so bad other than the few bits of platforming that you'll need to do. You cannot change direction in midair, so if you didn't get enough speed before making the leap, you aren't going to land where you intended to. Add in that jumping itself feels really stiff, and it's going to take a little bit of getting used to. Also a bit strange is that there is no scrolling between areas. Instead, the game simply switches screens when you get to the edge. It can be a bit jarring, especially when trying to jump around. Making matters worse though, there are plenty of areas where hits from enemies are unavoidable due to poor enemy placement. Combat itself is done easy enough. You slash a weapon, spit out magic, and try to take down any enemies. Combat is a bit easier than the platforming, thankfully, but you'll find some enemies to be a bit more of a hassle to kill than others. Each does have its own patterns that are easy enough to figure out though. In addition, enemies all have specific drops. If an enemy drops gold, they'll always drop coins. Others will drop loaves of bread, instantly regaining some of your health. Also, even though there's only one sprite for the bread, there's 3 different types, each with increasing amounts of health restored. You can use the enemies that drop the bread to your advantage, especially in dungeons. Kill one, grab the bread, leave the room, come back, and repeat. And you can use them as a sort of an inn. Actually, the biggest threat to your life is going to be the bosses. Most fire off projectiles, which will do hefty damage unless you have a good shield. At the start, you'll quickly find that magic is the easiest way to defeat these enemies. Other than elixirs, though, you cannot replenish your MP other than going back to town, so that is something that you may need to keep in mind. So with all of these threats that you'll find in the game, you'll obviously run across a full array of equipment. There are 4 swords, plenty of armor, shields to decrease the amount of projectile damage that you take, several spells casted by pressing up and B, and even some items that will need to be used. Magic is actually really useful, able to strike enemies both far away and lower than what your weapon may be able to hit. The more powerful the skill, the more damage it does, but also the more magic it uses up, reducing the amount of times you can throw that spell. You'll also come across various keys, denoted by face card titles, such as Ace, Jack, and King. These keys are typically sold in a key shop, and they take up one of the 8 valuable item slots. It may not seem like a big deal, buy one of the keys and just carry it with you, but things don't quite work like that. See, keys are a one-time use item. If you use one of the keys and leave the area for whatever reason, you'll have to buy another key if you didn't bring a spare, as the door is immediately locked behind you. These key creators must not know how to forge a sturdy key, I suppose. This isn't normally a big deal, but there are some of the areas in the late game zones that require you to have multiple copies of a key. If you didn't bring enough, you may have to backtrack and repurchase any keys that you've used. I hope you still have inventory spaces. Keys aren't the only items taking up space. Red potions will restore your life, and elixirs will restore both health and magic. Wing boots allow you to fly for a short time. A mattock will allow you to break a specific wall. You'll eventually come to learn what items are required in each area, but red potions are always a good idea to bring with you in larger quantities. Also, as a little bit of an odd quirk, any items or equipment you purchase cannot be put on while you are in a shop. So you literally have to buy your desired wares, leave the shop, and then go into the menu to equip them. It's a bit odd. It makes sense that you can't swing a sword in these places, but at the same time, there are a few trap houses in the world where monsters reside, and the only way you can dispatch them is to use magic, since the sword still can't be used inside these areas. There is another mechanic that needs to be mentioned, the experience system. It's not what you think. As you kill enemies, you'll earn the normal amounts of experience points, as is typical of these kinds of games. Once you get to a certain threshold, able to be viewed in the menu, you can find a priest, I mean guru, to gain a title. These titles essentially dictate what level you are at, but unlike most games, you don't earn any bonus damage, extra HP or MP, more inventory slots, none of that. In fact, you get absolutely no stat boosts at all. So, what are these titles used for? Well, death recovery. See, the game only contains a password system, no battery backup. So when continuing using said password, or respawning from death for that matter, you'll come to the last guru you visited. The amount of gold that you start with will depend on what title you have. That's it. Seriously. The only real benefit to getting XP is a bit of financial support when you die or continue. Actually, the higher titles even decrease the amount of time you spend in the air when using wing boots. Shouldn't it be the other way around? And yes, dying or continuing in any way resets your XP back to the last title you received. Once you have purchased everything you could possibly need, well, experience really doesn't mean squat. You can also exploit this, as if you purchase items and run low on gold, you can just reset the game, pop in the password, and bam, you're rich again. For the most part, Faxanadu is fairly fun, although incredibly challenging, but there are some odd problems I ran across. I already mentioned that the enemy placement occasionally feels cheap. Another oddity is that enemies have a hard time falling down between screens. You will fall through to the next screen no problem, but enemies will often float there just like there's a platform underneath. Another issue is with the Pendant. What it is supposed to do is increase your offensive power by a bit. What it actually does is lower it. Wait, what? Yeah, there's apparently some sort of programming bug that makes this optional item completely useless, allowing you to skip an entire tower, this game's form of dungeons. I was still able to complete the game after picking it up, but believe me, I was a bit confused. Thirdly, the story feels like it actually takes a backseat to the rest of the game. You're told about the dwarves and meteorite fairly early on, but near the end of the game, you're told about an evil one that happens to be an alien. This evil one is the final boss of the game, but the king of the dwarves, fought in a tower prior, gives you the dragon blade, the weapon able to defeat the evil one. It's just kinda strange, along with the fact that most of the dwarves are mutated into alien creatures as well. Oh well. The evil one is fairly easy, so once you get to him, the game is practically over. The sound is standard stuff, with music changing in the different towers and different parts of the world tree. The graphics also seem to be themed between world tree zones, although most of the towers all look pretty identical. There is a really cool poison mist effect in Zone 2 though, so that was pretty impressive to look at. Other than that, the sound and visuals are pretty average for the era. Just a few more notes before we wrap this up. For one, the currency isn't gold. It's golds. Plural. It kind of annoys me each time I see it, as it just seems wrong. Secondly, some of the merchants of the game are... smoking? Wait. Smoking? In an NES game? Was this game licensed by Nintendo? Well, here's the seal of approval, so Nintendo gave a go-ahead to smoking, but God forbid there's a cross in a Castlevania game. Doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Finally, I feel that the medics are secretly working for the dwarves. Why in the world would I think that? Well, the doctors are incredibly expensive, and unless you are close to death, you're better off going to the shop that sells dried meat, as 2 or 3 of these purchases can replenish your health and magic cheaper than the doctor. And if you do just need health, buying a red potion is usually the best bang for your buck. But let's say you do utilize the medic's services. After he's done patching you up, he tells you, Don't try too hard. Well, that's not very motivating now, is it? It's almost like he's telling you to simply give up so that the dwarves can rule the world tree. And that's Faxanadu. At first I thought the game was frustrating as hell to play, but once you get the hang of the stiff jumping and walking momentum, it's actually fairly fun. It's definitely not without its problems though. Some of the enemy placements can just be infuriating, as I've already died in spots because I couldn't get off of a ladder to get to where I needed to be, and I even forgot to mention this enemy, in which if you can't kill him quick enough, he'll hit you no matter where on the screen you are. That's totally fair. But overall, Faxanadu is still a good game to give time to, especially if you are a fan of the 2D action RPG genre. It won't break any molds, and I don't know if I'm ever really going to come back to it, other than maybe streaming it at some point, but it's still enjoyable for the first go-round. Final score? 4 out of 7. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.